It begins so softly that almost no one realizes it is happening. A child, barely 7 years old, looks into the eyes of a parent who is slowly collapsing inside. Sometimes it is addiction. Sometimes it is uncontrolled anger. Sometimes it is a painful emotional emptiness where presence should exist. And without anyone explaining it, something instinctive awakens inside that child's mind. If I don't keep everything together, no one else will. This is not the moment a child disappears physically. It is far quieter than that. It is the moment they vanish emotionally and psychologically. They start smiling more than they feel. They stop crying even when they need to. They learn to study the mood of a room before they speak. They become the emotional regulator of the household. They grow into miniature adults long before their minds and hearts are prepared for it. And society often applauds them for this transformation. People say they are mature, responsible, strong, reliable. Yet almost nobody pauses long enough to ask the most important question. What did it cost them to become this way? This is the silent sorrow carried by those who were forced to mature too early. The impact does not fade with time. It follows them into adulthood, shaping their relationships, their career choices, and their sense of self-worth. When this experience remains unexplored, a person often spends their entire adult life repeating the survival behaviors that once protected them, but now slowly damage their emotional well-being. To understand this, we must look at what happens during development. When a child is pushed into the role of emotionally supporting adults, instead of receiving support, psychologists refer to this as parentification. In this role, the child becomes the caretaker, the mediator, the counselor, and the protector. This situation is not simply unhealthy. It actually alters neurological development. When a child is consistently responsible for managing emotional tension, whether their own or others, it creates a state known as hypervigilance. This means living in constant alertness, always watching for emotional danger, walking carefully, afraid to trigger conflict. Gradually, the child begins to believe that love is conditional. Peace must be provided in order to receive safety. Their own needs begin to feel dangerous, while everyone else's needs feel urgent. So the child slowly fades emotionally. In their place grows a highly functional version of themselves. They become the well-behaved child, the silent achiever, the friend who listens to everyone's problems, the person who never asks for support. Over time, this identity becomes so convincing that even they forget it as a performance. Yet deep within, something continues to ache. Because the child they buried never truly disappeared. That inner voice still exists, silently asking, "Why didn't anyone protect me?" As they grow older, the emotional consequences become more complicated. They may develop extreme independence, refusing help even when they desperately need it. They might push people away or struggle to feel secure in loving relationships. Moments of happiness may feel unfamiliar or even unsafe. Rest can feel undeserved, while constant productivity becomes the only source of self-worth. Often, they remain unaware that they are still living in survival mode. When chaos becomes normalized during childhood, the nervous system begins to treat instability as normal. Calm environments feel uncomfortable. Peace feels suspicious. Love feels like a responsibility that must be repaid. This is the psychological reality of being forced to grow up too quickly. It is not simply sadness. It is a layered emotional trauma that reshapes how someone sees the world and themselves. You might wonder why any child would accept such responsibility. The answer is simple and biological. Children will sacrifice almost anything to maintain attachment, even their own identity. This is not weakness. It is instinct. It is survival intelligence. But here lies the tragedy. The very strategies that protected them during childhood often become emotional prisons during adulthood. Many adults function successfully on the outside while carrying deeply neglected inner children within them. They chase achievement to earn love. They remain silent to avoid rejection. They care for everyone else while secretly wishing someone would simply ask if they are okay. Deep inside, there is often a quiet longing, a fantasy that someone might finally see through their strength and allow them to break down safely. This longing does not belong to the adult version of themselves. It belongs to the child who never experienced childhood. Healing does not begin with fixing behaviors. It begins with acknowledgement. Until someone validates their own experience, they often minimize their pain by saying things like, "It wasn't that bad." Others had worse experiences. "I turned out fine." But being fine can also be a mask. And somewhere inside, they usually recognize that truth. When these children become adults, they often feel unsafe even in peaceful environments. They struggle to trust kindness in relationships. They give endlessly, but struggle to receive care. They apologize for expressing emotions. Compliments make them uncomfortable. They mistake exhaustion for accomplishment. This is the emotional price of premature maturity. If childhood taught them to be strong instead of vulnerable, silent instead of honest, and responsible for others while ignoring themselves, adulthood often becomes a life spent holding emotional tension, waiting for permission to finally collapse and rest. The reality is difficult, but necessary to accept. No one is coming to rescue the child that was left behind. The adult version of themselves must return and offer the compassion that was never received. They must say the words no one spoke. "You did not deserve that. You were only a child. You are allowed to rest now." This is where shadow work begins. Not by pretending everything is positive, not by performing strength, but by turning toward the neglected parts of oneself and offering presence and understanding. This process is painful because it requires feeling grief that was postponed for years. It requires confronting anger, sadness, and unmet emotional needs. It means mourning the celebrations that felt empty and the innocence lost while protecting others who should have provided protection. But grief is not weakness. It is evidence of emotional thawing. What was once frozen inside is finally beginning to move and release. These survival patterns often continue appearing subtly during adulthood. A person may become the emotional advisor in every friendship, while never revealing their own struggles. They may be praised for independence, while secretly fearing being a burden. In relationships, they may overcompensate by managing everything, explaining excessively, and eventually feeling resentment. Setting boundaries becomes extremely difficult because saying no feels like betrayal. These behaviors are not personality traits. They are learned coping mechanisms. And importantly, they can be unlearned, but only when strength is no longer glorified above emotional healing. One of the most transformative questions a person can ask is, what did I need as a child that I never received? The answers may be simple, but powerful. Someone to say it wasn't their fault. Someone to genuinely ask how they felt. Freedom to play, rest, and laugh without fear. Gradually, a person can begin providing those experiences to themselves, not to erase the past, but to stop reliving it. This is how individuals stop searching for parental validation in romantic relationships. This is how anxiety stops disguising itself as intuition. This is how they stop avoiding the child they once were and start embracing the adult they are becoming. Carl Jung once explained that true self-awareness cannot occur without discomfort. People will go to extreme lengths to avoid confronting their inner world. Shadow work requires facing every hidden part: the shame, the fear, the anger, and the neglect. Because healing is not about transforming into someone new. It is about rediscovering who existed before life demanded survival over authenticity. If you were someone who had to grow up too quickly, remember this: your maturity was never your flaw. The real problem was that you were forced into it without choice. Now, however, you do have a choice. You can allow softness into your life. You can allow yourself to rest. You can stop carrying responsibility for everyone else's emotions and begin respecting your own. This transformation does not happen instantly. Some days you will feel emotionally young again. That is not regression. That is healing. That is your inner child finally being allowed to exist. Let them return. Let them express emotions. Let them experience joy and comfort. Because you are not damaged. You are integrating. You are becoming whole. Perhaps for the first time, you are learning how to grow correctly, not through pressure or fear, but through honesty and self-compassion. Your childhood may have been taken from you, but your future still belongs to you. And now you have the power to write it.